What if I told you that in the next few days a major event is coming upon the earth, specifically upon the American nation? Now do not panic. God revealed this to an active soldier so that we, his beloved, can know and be prepared. Tell us where you are watching from, so we can connect with you and have our prayer team join you in prayer. We also ask that you share this experience with at least 2 people so they can be prepared and saved as well. Now, I will begin sharing today's experience. My name is Marcus Dillon. I am a sergeant in the United States Army, currently stationed at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. I am 34 years old. I have a wife named Denise and 2 children, a boy named Isaac, who is 9, and a girl named Amara, who is 6. I love football. I like to cook on weekends. I go to church sometimes, but if I am being honest, I was not a man who thought deeply about spiritual things. I believed in God the way most people do, somewhere in the back of my mind, in a general sort of way, but not in a way that touched my daily life. That changed on February 3rd. I have been trying to figure out how to tell this experience for 2 weeks now. I have written it and deleted it several times. My chaplain, Chaplain Reeves, sat with me for 3 hours last week and told me I needed to stop keeping this inside and just put it out in the world. He said people needed to hear it. My wife said the same thing, and so here I am, doing my best to describe something that no human words were designed to describe. I will tell you what happened, and I will tell you what I was told, because what is coming between February 19th and February 21st is something I believe every person alive right now needs to know about before those days arrive. I want to start by saying something before anything else. I am not a man who cries easily. I have been in the military for 11 years. I have served 2 combat deployments. I have watched people die right in front of me. I have held a fellow soldier in my arms while the life left his body. I have done things and seen things that most people will never have to experience in their entire lives. And through all of that, I kept myself together. That is just who I am. That is how I was trained. That is how I had to be. But when I try to write what happened to me on the night of February 3rd, 2025, my hands shake, my chest tightens, my eyes fill up with water, and I have to stop and breathe and remind myself that I am here. I am alive, and I have a responsibility to tell this experience, no matter how people react to it. It was a training exercise. That is the part that still gets me. I was not in combat. I was not overseas. I was on home soil, doing what soldiers do on a regular Tuesday night. Our unit had been running a joint field training operation with another battalion. We had been out in the cold for about 14 hours. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should have led to what happened. We had stopped to set up a perimeter checkpoint near the edge of a simulated forward operating base. It was around 11:40 at night. I remember checking my watch. The temperature had dropped sharply and we were all tired. I was kneeling down, adjusting some equipment near one of the vehicles, when I felt something in my chest that I had never felt before in my life. It was not pain at first. It was more like something squeezing, like something was gripping my chest from the inside and pulling everything tight. I stood up and tried to take a breath and could not get enough air. Then the pain came. And when it came, it was not like any pain I had ever felt. It was enormous. It was like something inside. My chest was collapsing. I tried to call out to Private Hewitt, who was standing about 10 feet away from me, but I only got his name halfway out of my mouth before my legs gave out and I went down. I hit the cold ground and I heard boots running toward me. I heard voices. I heard someone shout for the medic. I could feel hands on me. But all of that was becoming very far away, very fast. The sounds were getting distant, like when you are underwater and you can still hear things above the surface, but they are muffled and small. I was not afraid. That is another thing I keep coming back to. You would think a man going down like that in the dark would be terrified. But I was not afraid. I felt strangely calm, almost peaceful. The pain was still there, but it was like it belonged to someone else, like I was watching myself from a slight distance. Then everything went completely dark and completely silent. Not the kind of dark that happens when you close your eyes. Not the kind of silence that comes when things go quiet. This was total, absolute, like the whole world had simply stopped existing. I was not unconscious. I know what unconscious feels like. I had been knocked out before during a training accident several years back. That is a blank, a nothing, a gap in memory. This was not that. I was aware. I was present. I just had no body anymore. The medical report later confirmed that my heart stopped, cardiac arrest, caused by an undiagnosed heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which apparently had been sitting quietly in my chest my entire life, just waiting. The medic and 2 other soldiers worked on me for 22 minutes before they got a pulse back. 22 minutes. The medic, Specialist Torres, told me afterward that she had given up twice in her head and then kept going anyway. She said she does not know why. She just kept going. For those 22 minutes, I was somewhere else entirely. The best way I can describe the transition is this. It was like being in a room that suddenly expanded in every direction at once, so that what had been walls became open sky, and what had been floor became something solid that I cannot name. I was standing. I had no physical body, but I was still me. I was still Marcus. I still had my thoughts, my memories, my sense of who I am, but the body was gone, and I was not bothered by its absence, which was itself one of the strangest parts of the whole experience. The place I found myself in was bright, but not blinding. The light was not coming from any one direction. It was just there, everywhere, the way daylight fills a room, but without any shadows. And the colors. I have to spend some time on the colors because I think they matter. What I saw around me were colors that I do not have names for. I am not being dramatic or trying to make this sound more impressive than it was. I am telling you that the human eye and the human world does not have access to what I saw in that place. There were shades of things that were between the colors we know, in the gaps between them, colors that the light here cannot produce. And they were beautiful in a way that made me feel something deep and aching, the way a song sometimes makes you feel something you cannot explain. There was also sound, but it was not sound that came through ears. It was something that moved through whatever I was at that moment. Like music, but bigger than music. Like music that was also a feeling, like every beautiful thing you have ever heard all happening at once. But in a way that was perfectly clear, not confused or overwhelming. I stood there taking it in for what felt like a long time, and then I became aware that I was not alone. There was a figure approaching me through the light. I want to be careful about how I describe what I saw. He did not look like the paintings in churches. He did not look exactly like any image I have ever seen anywhere. But from the very first moment my awareness landed on him, I knew who he was. Not because someone told me. Not because of any physical feature I can point to. I just knew. The way you know when you wake up, that you are in your own house and not somewhere else. It was a recognition that did not require thinking. It was Jesus Christ. When he came close, the feeling that came over me is something I will spend the rest of my life trying to put into words and probably never succeed. The closest I can come is this. You know how when you have been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and then someone takes it from you, and there is that moment of relief and release that is so complete it almost takes your breath away? Now multiply that by everything, by every burden you have ever carried, every mistake, every regret, every moment of shame or failure or loneliness, all of it seen, all of it known, and all of it not held against you. That is what his presence felt like. The space around us changed. I was no longer just standing in that beautiful place. I was also somehow looking at the earth from above, the way you might look at a map, except that it was alive and moving, and I could feel the weight of what I was seeing. I could see the world laid out below, every continent, every city, and I could see something else, a kind of spiritual layer over everything, like a film on top of the physical world, light in some places, darkness in others, and currents of something moving between them, like weather systems but made of something that is not air. He showed me 3 dates glowing over this view of the world: February 19th, February 20th, and February 21st. They were brighter than everything else around them, like lights in a dark room. He told me these 3 days were going to be unlike anything that had happened on Earth in a very long time. How now you will dig that people had been going through their lives, busy and distracted and comfortable, and that this was about to change. He told me that too many people had been living in a way that kept God at a comfortable distance, going to church on Sundays sometimes, saying a quick prayer before meals, putting a fish sticker on their car, but not actually changing anything about how they lived or what they valued or who they really were on the inside. He said this was going to be challenged in a way that could not be ignored. And then the first vision opened up before me. He showed me February 19th, and what I saw happening on that day was something I am still processing. Across America and across the world, ordinary people in the middle of their ordinary days suddenly stopped, not because of any external event, not because of any news report or alarm or emergency broadcast. They stopped because something inside them stopped them, something they could not name but could not ignore. I watched a man in a business office in Atlanta put down his phone and sit back in his chair and stare at the ceiling. Tears started coming down his face, and he did not even seem to understand why. I watched a teenage girl in a school hallway in Ohio stop mid-step and press her back against the wall and slide down to the floor, not from weakness, but from the weight of something she was feeling that she had no frame of reference for. I watched a truck driver pull to the side of the interstate in Texas and put his hands on the steering wheel and just sit there, breathing, with something moving through him that he could not explain. Millions of people, all on the same day, all feeling the same thing in their own way, like a hand pressed gently against their chest, like a voice speaking into a part of them that they did not even know existed. Some of them responded by going to their knees. Some of them called their spouses or their parents or their estranged siblings. Some of them drove directly to churches. Some of them just sat and cried and felt something they had not felt in years, which was hope. But he also showed me the other side of this, because not everyone responded that way. I watched people feel that same stirring and immediately push it down. A man turning up the volume on his television as loud as it would go. A woman reaching for her phone and scrolling faster, trying to fill her attention with anything other than what she was feeling. A young man going to the kitchen and opening a cabinet he should not have opened. People running from something they could feel but did not want to face. He told me that this was the beginning of a separation, that every person on earth would feel the presence of God during these 3 days, but that not everyone would respond to it, that the choice each person made and how they responded would matter in ways that went far beyond those 3 days. He said to me that this was not about religion. It was not about which church someone attended or what denomination they belonged to or whether they had the right vocabulary. It was about the condition of a person's heart, whether a person, when given a real and genuine opportunity to turn toward truth, would do so, or whether they would choose again to turn away. The vision shifted, and I found myself watching what was happening inside churches on February 20th. And what I saw was not one thing. It was 2 completely different things happening at the same time in different places, and the contrast between them was one of the most painful parts of the entire experience. In some churches, I watched something beautiful happening. Pastors were standing up in front of their congregations and saying things they had never had the courage to say before, admitting that they had been more focused on keeping their congregation happy than on speaking difficult truths, confessing that they had let the church become a comfortable routine rather than a living encounter with something real. And as they did this, something broke open in those rooms. People were responding, weeping, praying, reaching for each other. People who had not spoken in years were suddenly standing up and walking across the room to someone they had hurt or someone who had hurt them. He showed me healings taking place. I want to be careful here because I know this is the part that people find hardest to accept. But I am telling you what I saw. People in wheelchairs standing up. A woman who had been deaf since childhood tilting her head and hearing her own name spoken by the person beside her for the first time. An elderly man with a disease that had been slowly taking his sight, watching colors come back into the edges of his vision. These things were happening in rooms full of people who were not particularly special, who had no special faith or religious credentials, but who had simply opened themselves up to what was happening. But in other churches, the picture was very different. I watched leaders standing at microphones telling their congregations that what was happening around the country was dangerous, that the emotions people were feeling were manipulative. that true faith did not look like this, that they needed to be careful, to be measured, to be skeptical. These leaders were afraid, not of the enemy, but of losing control, of losing the structure and the order and the authority they had built their ministry around, and their fear was causing them to close the door on the very thing God was trying to bring through it. He showed me something that broke me completely in that moment. He showed me his own face as he watched these scenes, and there were tears on it, not because he was weak or overcome, but because he loved the people in those rooms, including the leaders, and he was watching them choose safety and comfort and control over the thing they had spent their whole careers saying they believed in. The truth of God had walked through the front door of their churches, and they had asked it to please use the back. He told me that what was happening was separating two kinds of people who had been sitting side by side for a very long time. People who actually knew him from people who only knew about him. People who had a real relationship with God from people who had a religious habit, and that this separation was painful but necessary because he was not willing to let his people stay in that in-between space forever. The final vision was February 21st, and this one I am going to try to describe as carefully as I can, because it is the one that is hardest to put into words, and the one that I believe matters most for people to understand right now. He showed me something going out from Jerusalem. I do not know how to describe it except as a light, but not the kind of light your eyes see. It was more like a signal or a pulse, something that spread outward from that one point and moved across the entire planet in a matter of seconds, passing through every wall and every building and every underground shelter, reaching into every corner of the earth, touching every person at once. When this happened, every person alive felt it. There was no way not to feel it. There was no sleeping through it, no distracting yourself from it, no pretending it was not there. Every human being on the planet, at that same moment, encountered something that was unmistakably real and unmistakably bigger than themselves. And then I watched the world split. For those who had been opening their hearts through the previous 2 days, February 21st was something I cannot do justice to in words. I watched their faces change, not in a scary or strange way. They just became more fully themselves, like something that had been dim in them was being turned all the way up. Their eyes were different, clearer. They were being filled with something that I can only call peace, but it was peace that was also strength. They were not floating away on some spiritual cloud. They were more grounded, more present, more real than they had ever been. I watched strangers moving toward each other, not because they had organized it or planned it, just because the same thing was in all of them, and it was drawing them together. Rich people and poor people, old people and young people, people from communities that had been in conflict for decades, suddenly finding themselves standing together, held by something that was bigger than all the reasons they had kept apart. He showed me communities forming, places where people were sharing what they had, taking care of each other, where someone with too much was giving to someone with not enough, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of genuine love, where people were praying for the sick and the sick were getting better, where problems that governments and institutions had failed to solve for generations were being quietly solved by ordinary people operating from a completely different foundation. But for those who had spent the previous 2 days running away from what they were feeling, February 21st brought something else. The same light that brought peace to the ones who were open brought something like terror to those who had closed themselves off. Not because God was punishing them, but because when you have been running from something this real, this unavoidable, this present, and it finally catches up to you, the contrast between where you are and where you could have been is overwhelming. I watched people who had spent years building their identity around the idea that there was nothing beyond the physical world, suddenly confronted with something they could not explain away. And instead of responding with humility, many of them doubled down. The harder God pressed, the harder they pushed back. The more undeniable the evidence, the more desperate the denial. And in that denial I could see something closing in them, something settling and hardening. He told me that this was the great separation that had been spoken about throughout history, that the line being drawn was not based on religion, not based on denomination, not based on how much theology a person knew. It was based purely on the state of a person's heart, whether a person, when given every possible opportunity, would choose to receive love, or whether they would refuse it. He showed me how the systems of the world would respond to what was happening during these 3 days. I am a soldier, and I believe in institutions, and I have given years of my life to serving my country. But what I saw was hard to watch. I watched government officials in emergency meetings, trying to figure out what was happening and how to contain it. They were using words like mass hysteria and public health crisis and coordinated psychological event. They were not saying these things because they were evil people. Most of them genuinely believed these explanations. They had spent their lives in a framework where the supernatural did not exist, and so when the supernatural showed up undeniably, their only option was to find a natural explanation, no matter how inadequate it was. I watched news broadcasts where experts were being brought on to explain what was happening. Psychiatrists, sociologists, neuroscientists, all of them speaking confidently about group psychology and social media, contagion and collective behavior. None of them willing to say the simplest and most obvious thing, that what was happening could not be explained by the tools they were using to try to explain it. I watched social media platforms scrambling to remove content related to what people were experiencing. Posts about miraculous healings were taken down within minutes. Accounts of encounters with God were flagged as misinformation. Algorithms were being adjusted in real time to suppress what millions of people were trying to share with each other. The platforms framed it as protecting public safety. But what I was watching was something that looked a lot like fear. Fear of something too big to control. He showed me how technology was going to be used in the months that followed these 3 days. Banking systems being adjusted to put financial pressure on people who publicly identified with what had happened. Monitoring systems tracking which conversations contained certain words or ideas. New laws being passed quickly, framed as protecting society, but functioning to make it harder and harder for people who had been changed during those 3 days to live openly according to what they now knew to be true. And I watched families breaking apart, parents and children on opposite sides of the line, siblings who had been close their whole lives finding themselves in different worlds overnight, people losing jobs, losing friendships, losing the comfortable lives they had built, simply because they would not deny what had happened to them during those 3 days. But then he showed me what was happening inside those communities of people who had received the light. And this was extraordinary. They were not crumbling under the pressure. They were being held together by something that could not be manufactured by any human institution. When their supply chains were cut off, things appeared. When their communications were monitored, they found ways to reach each other that the monitoring could not detect. When they were sick, they prayed for each other, and healings happened. When they were afraid, a peace settled over them that made fear step back. He told me that every effort made to destroy these people would only make them stronger. That the story of his people being persecuted and becoming more powerful through persecution was not a new story. It was his oldest story, and it was going to play out again. After showing me all of this, he turned to me. I want to be careful here because I do not want to overstate what happened. I am not claiming a special status. I am not saying I was chosen above anyone else. I think the truth is simpler and harder than that. I think I was chosen for this moment the same way anyone is chosen for anything, because I was available, because I was in the right condition to receive it, and because the people around me who might hear this story needed to hear it from someone they could relate to. He told me that the time before February 19th was not to be wasted, that what a person did with the days between now and then mattered, not in the sense of performing religious rituals or checking off a list, but in the sense of sincerely asking, what is the actual condition of my heart? Not what do I believe on paper, but what do I actually love? What do I actually pursue when no one is watching? What do I actually value when it costs me something? He told me that he was not asking for perfection, that he had never asked for perfection, that what he was asking for was honesty, genuine, humble honesty about who a person was and who they wanted to become. He told me that he was not standing at the door of anyone's life with a list of charges. He was standing there with open hands. He told me to tell people that he loved them, not in the way we use that word when it has become small and routine. He told me to tell people that his love for them was the foundation of existence, that every person alive was loved with a love so specific and so complete that if you could feel even 1% of it for 1 second, you would never again wonder whether your life had value. He told me to be clear about something, that the days coming were not a threat, they were a gift. That what was about to happen was mercy, not judgment. That judgment was what came when mercy had been completely spent. And that right now, mercy was being poured out. That these 3 days in February were his way of knocking on a door one more time before the season of knocking came to an end. He told me that the people who worried him most were not the people who had rejected him outright. It was the people who were right on the edge, the people who knew the truth but had been putting off responding to it, the people who believed but had let their belief become a background thing, something they would get more serious about later, when things settled down, when the kids were older, when life got less busy. He told me that these people were the ones most in danger of letting this window close without walking through it. And then he gave me my final instructions. He told me to go back. He told me to tell people what I had seen. He told me that my background as a soldier would matter, that people who might dismiss a preacher would listen to a soldier, that my willingness to put my name on this story would matter to people who were on the fence. He told me to tell the truth clearly and not to dress it up or water it down. He told me to trust that the people who needed to hear it would hear it. He told me that February 19th through 21st would determine the eternal trajectory of millions of souls, and the most of them had no idea what was coming. Coming back. The way back felt like falling, not in a frightening way, but like gravity had remembered me and was pulling me home. The light began to thin. The music began to fade, and then there was cold ground under my back, and cold air on my face, and someone was pressing on my chest, and someone else was crying, and there were lights above me that were white and sharp and very much of this world. I know what people are going to say. I have already heard some of it. Oxygen deprivation to the brain, the dying mind producing comforting hallucinations, wishful thinking, a soldier cracking under years of accumulated stress. I have heard all of it, and I understand all of it, because before February 3rd, I probably would have said the same things. But I am asking you to consider something. I am a man who has spent 11 years in the United States Army. I have been trained to operate under extreme stress. I have been trained to observe accurately and report clearly. I have been trained to know the difference between what is real and what my mind is manufacturing under pressure. What happened to me on February 3rd was not something my mind manufactured. I know the difference. I am absolutely certain of that. I am also telling you that I have nothing to gain from this. I am not selling anything. I am not promoting anything. I am a sergeant in the United States Army who had his heart stop in a field on a Tuesday night in February and came back with something he was told to share. My only job now is to share it as honestly and as clearly as I can. February 19th through 21st is very close. The window for preparing your heart, for getting honest with yourself about where you actually stand, is short. And I am not saying this to frighten you. I am saying it because he told me that everyone who prepared their hearts before those 3 days arrived would experience what was coming as the most significant blessing of their lives, while those who arrived unprepared would find the same events overwhelming and disorienting in ways that would be very hard to recover from. Preparing your heart does not mean becoming perfect before a deadline. It means being honest. It means sitting down somewhere quiet and asking yourself what you actually believe and why. It means thinking about the people in your life that you owe something to and considering whether there is anything left unresolved. It means turning toward the thing you may have been turning away from for years and letting it know that you are ready to look at it. He told me that the simplest thing a person could do in the days before February 19th was this: sit quietly and say from your heart, I am here. I am willing. Show me what is true. That is it. Not a long ritual, not a complicated formula, just honesty, just openness, just showing up. I go back to duty next week. I will put my uniform back on, and I will serve this country the same way I always have. Because I believe in that calling, and I am not walking away from it. But I am a different man than the one who went down on that field on February 3rd. Something in me was permanently rearranged by what I experienced, and I would not go back even if I could. I think about Torres a lot lately, about the fact that she kept going when she had given up in her own mind twice. I do not think that was just professional stubbornness. I think something was holding her hands on my chest. I think I was supposed to come back. I think you were supposed to read this. I think that if this account has found its way to you, in whatever way that happened, it is not a coincidence. I believe in things being placed in front of people at the right time for the right reason. February 19th through 21st. Those are the dates he showed me. Those are the dates I am telling you about. The question every person reading this needs to answer is a simple one. When those days arrive and that moment comes, what will the condition of your heart be? I was dead for 22 minutes. I stood in the presence of something so real and so good that everything in this world looks different to me now. And the most urgent thing I was sent back to tell you is this: you are loved, you are known, and there is still time to choose. Choose well,